So welcome everybody. This is 90 Interpreting Days. This is a series of videos that I record every time by the end of my work shift, where I discuss the things that happened during the day. Of course, everything always under confidentiality and respecting HIPAA rules and such. But the purpose of these discussions is to really, dis really go over the details of over the phone interpreting in different settings, because there is a lot of there are a lot of things that happened in any given day. For example, I haven't been interpreting for a very it's been weeks since I have interpreted, and now I'm back to it, and every day, even after a month, two, or even just one day or two, I always learn something new in a call, something that makes me think about the standards of practice and the ethics and protocols and such. So let's just get started right away. I made some notes, and as you can see, I'm going to talk about quite a wide variety of topics. So first, I'm going to start with in my first call, one of my first calls earlier today, there was a person describing what it feels like to be out of breath, to be basically having wheezing sounds in their breathing, like a wheeze. And that person, while they were describing what they were feeling to the provider, they used something that we call in Spanish onomatopeya. I think that's where you make a sound. For example, the dogs say woof woof, the cats say meow meow, and then she said she made a sound imitating what she felt, that describing her symptoms, right? And that wheezing sound. And I was like, hey, do I really have to repeat that wheezing sound as well, like the sound that she tried to make, because it conveyed a lot of meaning, but it really made me think, like, do we have to also interpret those non-verbal things, like those, I don't know how to say it in English, let me know in the chat, those onomatopeia sounds, to convey the meaning? Or will that be too silly? I didn't want the provider or the patient think that I was making fun of them by imitating their sounds of the wheezing sounds, right? So that was one thing. The other thing is that I had a provider who really had issues articulating their words. They weren't very articulate, and they were just slurring and mumbling. And I'm like, you're a provider, you shouldn't do that. Like, you should know better. Like, please speak clearly, especially if it is over the phone. It felt like the provider was too informal, and that's something that affects interpretation as well. Not only I mean, mainly the interaction with the patient, but also how we have to interpret them with their mumbling and all that. It's hard to understand and read and what they're saying. Another thing is that then also the very first call that I had in my day, I was like, okay, I'm getting ready. And bam, I had to interpret for a lady who was getting a medical checkup in prison or jail. Basically, she was checking into prison or jail, and they asked her a bunch of questions that combined with legal jargon used in jails, combined with medical jargon. And that's something that I definitely have to improve, because whenever I get those calls, I do very well in the medical portion, but the jail language and jargon portion, I don't do very well. And then yeah, that was one thing. I'm just going to briefly check the chat to see if we have any comments. I just want to make sure that I'm not skipping anybody. Oh, Fabian Buitrago says onomatopoeia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please don't judge me. Onomatopoeia, maybe. But thank you so much, Fabian. I'm just checking the different comments. Thanks. Now, moving forward, Another thing that happened to me today is that I had a patient who was very, very hesitant. And that was hard because, for example, when you have a patient that like is very ambiguous, some people don't know how to communicate. For example, they say like a paper and something and this something and this something else. Like that's literally what you hear because they don't really make a lot of sense because they don't even know what they want to ask. So they, for example, say, yeah, because I wanted to do this. And also wanted to do that. So in that split of a second where they pause, but they also continue, you are already starting interpreting, and then they continue with that. So patients who are very hesitant, it's difficult to know when are they actually done. So you can start your rendition. So if you have any tips for that, please let me know, especially over the phone. Remember, all of this over the phone, I'm unable to see the patient or their facial, expressions and gestures. It's hard to know when with that hesitancy, right? But basically, I just roll with it. I do my best. I give them more than enough time because if you stay quiet for too long, then they will start asking more questions. It's like a non stop thread of like train of thought. So you have to interpret and jump in at some point. So there is also that factor. So basically that how I dealt with it is that I immediately after a pause, I will interpret like jumping right away. So then I can, when it's obviously a pause, and if they interrupt me and if they talk over me, that's something that I cannot control at the end of the day. Okay, so I had two very interesting cases today. One of them was about 911, and the other one was about a lady who was 18,000 in debt with unemployment compensation. And this was a very, very interesting case. And I actually took some notes of this, but basically just to give you a gist, she had an issue with her employer, and she ended up owing $18,000 to unemployment compensation. She was very upset. She started crying, and the whole story, the whole situation was so complex, so like so many details, like because it's about he said, she said, this happened 1 year ago, and then this year I did that, and then 6 months ago I did. So it's even hard to follow in the same language because it's a whole story. So at that point, she was speaking in very, very long utterances. Okay, and she started crying. She was very, very upset. It's $18,000 in debt for this poor lady who lost her job, didn't have anybody she was in a very difficult position in life, right? So me as an interpreter, if I see her so visibly upset, or I hear her, right, because it's only telephone, am I going to interrupt her and tell her, wait, I need you to pause for the interpreter because you are speaking in you are giving me too many sentences at a time. It will feel like I'm making her feel uncomfortable just with my presence, just with the fact that she has to speak in short sentences for me. And this is something that in in-person interpretation, you are able to switch to the simultaneous mode. But in over the phone interpretation, it's impossible to do that. You cannot do that. You have to let them, you have two options. You can interrupt them and make them even more upset and make them feel uncomfortable, or you can let them go on until they finish their story, and then do your best, take your notes, have a very, very good memory. I had 4 pages, almost 5 pages of notes that I had to repeat back. Like that's like 1.5 minutes of a speech. So this makes me think about two things. First, that we interpreters over the phone really need to have a exceptional memory because we cannot switch to simultaneous. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that as much as we want to, it's hard to keep all of the details, especially when the story is so complex, when it goes so fast, when the lady is crying, so maybe she doesn't even pronounce her words very well. And then you have the over the phone factor that maybe the quality is not even that good. So then I basically I try to do my best, and I know that I omitted some details, but I have the most important words, the key ideas. And this is a lot like what you do in simultaneous. When the speaker goes too fast, it's just impossible to keep up. And if you try to keep up, you're going to end up saying nonsense. It's going to be so fast. It's going to be too fast to understand, or it's going to be really very, very sloppy all over the place. So you kind of have to listen, right? And then kind of give a summary, but a very, very good summary of the main ideas, key points, and convey their emotions and try to cope with it. You have to cope with summarization because it's just, there is no other way. So I have a comment in here for Marwa. Thank you, Marwa. She says, do not interrupt her. Do your best and summarize and let the provider know. And next time, tell her to pause for accuracy purposes. That's very good. That's a very good. Yes. I think that's a very good idea to let the provider know what you're doing. Definitely, for sure. I maybe or out of everything she said, I said like maybe 90% or 85%. I always strive to 100%, but I definitely think that that tip, always let the other person know that you're going to summarize, is an excellent, excellent tip. So thank you, Marwa Ayman, for that information. So yeah, so that's what happens when you are in high stress, highly emotional circumstances, right? So that's why interpreters over the phone, because we cannot use simultaneous, we need to have a very, very good memory. So Genoveva says, I had the same provider who will use a lot of filler words. Yeah, so before he started his sentences. The LEP was running out of patience, so I decided not to interpret those filler words. Yes, exactly. So sometimes, our ethics and standards of practice tells us that we have to do things this way, but there are so many circumstances, there are so many gray areas that can happen. So you cannot take everything like to a T all the time, because taking everything to a T actually hinders communication. You are not a facilitator. You are creating more trouble by doing some things so like so strictly, right? And then Marwa says, you are welcome. You're amazing, an amazing interpreter. Thank you, Marwa, and thank you, everybody. So now this is I'm not over. My day is not over yet. I had a 911 call, and I had never had this call before. So this was a man who called 911 because he was having a lot of chest pain. And when the 911 dispatcher asked him, why is he having chest pain? He said that he's overdosing. He was literally overdosing on the phone with a lot of chest pain and saying that he was going to die. He was a little bit out of breath. He was with other people, and the other people in his background were freaking out around him. They were freaking out. And then all of this, they have this interaction, and the LEP is very, very reluctant to saying what drug he took. So that was interesting, and I got a little bit nervous. When I get nervous, I start to stutter, because it's just 911 just gets in my nerves. I mean, not in my nerves, I'm sorry. It just makes me nervous for some reason. But I really like those calls because I feel like I'm really making a difference between life or death. And in this case, I believe I did. And then the thing here is that the 911 dispatcher actually hung up on him, because she actually got the ambulance going, and she gave him instructions like, please lay down in a comfortable position, and what else? Yeah, basically instructions, right? And then after he was being like, oh my God, just send me the ambulance, I don't want to answer any questions. Of course, the dispatcher was actually asking those questions to help him, to help the paramedics that were going to get there, right? And that was interesting. And then the thing is that she hung up on him, and then I was on the line, and I didn't know what to do, because obviously he was in pain. He was basically maybe dying, probably having a heart attack. and I ended up calling the agent, the customer service representative for the agency that I work for. And then I asked her for instructions, like, please tell me, what do I have to do? Do I stay on the line with the patient? Do I call 911 back? What do I do, please? Because it wasn't that the call dropped. It was that the 911 agent actually disconnected the call. So that happened. And basically that was my day. Whenever I watch these videos, I always see I have a lot of facial expressions. So I'm sorry, my gestures are very loud. So I'm sorry about that. Anyways, yeah, that was pretty much my day. And every day I learn something new. And the more I experience over the phone interpretation, the more I feel like we really need to have a sort of guide for us remote interpreters about what to do under certain circumstances. Like, what about the 911 call, where the 911 agent hung up? What about when the patient, when you cannot switch to simultaneous, but you cannot stop them or interrupt them either? I really like what Marwa said. So I think it's good to have all of this outlined for remote interpreters, because we actually need it. And how do we get there? I think by discussing this with other people, and having meetings with other telephonic and video remote interpreters. I think that's how we are going to brainstorm to basically create a standard for all of us, so we can all know what we have to do in a similar or in the same circumstance. So I invite you to keep watching these videos, and maybe join also my group. I have a group called Remote Interpreters in Latin America, and I plan to create these discussions with this group. So that was pretty much it. That was very interesting. So let me know in the chat if you have any comments, any questions, because I'm basically, that was everything that I wanted to say for today. So just let me know. Okay, I'm just going to wait a few minutes, because I know that sometimes it takes a few minutes for the chat to update. And those of you who are going to watch this video in YouTube, you can follow me in Facebook, InterproMed, and that's where I live stream and then I upload to YouTube. So if you want to become part of the conversation, please follow me in social media. Okay, so I can see we have no more comments. So I'm going to end the live stream now, but if you have any other questions or ideas, you can always post the comment and I will read them later. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Marwa, Fabian, and Genoveva. And see you next time in another Nanji's Interpreting Days episode. Okay? Okay, goodbye, everybody.